Hello friends, today we are going to learn about the topic attributes of identity as a service, in which we are going to learn what are the things or attributes identity as a service has so that it can improve a user's experience and users jump to identity as a service for its values. Identity as a service or attributes of identity as a service. Identity and access management is a generic term used to describe an organization's internal processes that focus on managing user accounts and corporate network resources, including access rights for organizations, users, applications, and systems. It includes functions to manage the identity of a user on the network and servers, primarily to authenticate users, thus ensuring the rights requested by them. The attributes or the attributes of the identity management space are worth knowing. That means, what are the attributes? How do they work? Now, let's take a brief discussion about the attributes of identity as a service. First thing is access management. So, access management here, it refers to the processes and technologies used to control and monitor network access. Access management features such as authentication, authorization, trust, and security auditing are part and parcel of the top identity management systems for both on-premises and cloud-based systems. Then another attribute here for identity as a service is Active Directory. Here Microsoft or Active Directory was developed by Microsoft. Microsoft developed Active Directory as a user identity directory service for Windows domain networks. Though proprietary, Active Directory is included in the Windows Server operating system and is thus widely deployed. Another attribute for identity as a service is biometric authentication, a security process for authenticating users who are accessing that particular cloud resource is that relies upon the user's unique characteristics. Biometric authentication technologies include fingerprint sensors, iris and retina scanning, and facial recognition. Another attribute for identity as a service is context-aware network access control. Context-aware network access control is a policy-based method of granting access to network resources according to the current context of the user seeking access. For example, a user attempting to authenticate from an IP address that hasn't been whitelisted would be blocked. That means which is not there on the list, it will be blocked if an authenticate or some address is trying to access from an authenticate user. Then another attribute is the credentials. Here, an identifier employed by the user to gain access to a network, such as the user's password, public key, infrastructure certificate, or biometric information such as fingerprint, iris scan, etc. Then another attribute is deprovisioning. Here, the process of removing an identity from an ID repository and terminating access privileges is known as deprovisioning, which is also provided in identity as a service. Another thing is digital identity. Here, the identity itself, including the description of the user and his, her, or its access privileges, it is because an endpoint such as a laptop or a smartphone can have its own digital identity. That means if it is in the network, it will have its own identity. Then entitlement, the set of attributes that specify the access rights and privileges of an authenticated security principle. And identity as a service, here cloud based identity as a service, it offers identity and access management functionality to an organization system that resides on premise and or in the cloud. Identity lifecycle management is another attribute for identity as a service. Similar to access lifecycle management, the term refers to the entire set of processes and technologies for maintaining and updating digital identities. Identity lifecycle management includes identity synchronization, provisioning, deprovisioning, and the ongoing management of user attributes, credentials, and the entitlements which it has. Then identity synchronization. What identity synchronization is? The process of ensuring that multiple identity stores, say the result of an acquisition, or it contain consistent data for a given digital identity. Then lightweight directory access protocol, commonly known as LDAP, which is also present in the email services which we use. So LDAP is an open standard based protocol for managing and accessing a distributed directory service such as Microsoft's Active Directory, or when you are using Google email services, then also this LDAP protocol is working there. It is managing the directory names and addresses there. Multi-factor authentication is another attribute for identity as a service. Here, multi-factor authentication is when more than just a single factor, such as a username and password, is required for authentication to a network or system. At least one additional step is required, such as receiving a code sent via SMS to a smartphone, or inserting a smart card or USB stick, or satisfying a biometric authentication requirement such as fingerprint scan. Then password reset, that means once a user is being assigned with the username, then if the user forgets the password, it can reset it also with the help of this identity as a service, or it is one of the attribute in it. So here in this context, it is a feature of an ID management system that allows users to re-establish their own passwords, relieving the administrators of the job and cutting support calls. The reset application is often accessed by the user through a browser. The application asks for a secret word or a set of questions to verify the user's identity. Then, privileged account management. This term refers to managing and auditing accounts and data access based on the privileges of the user. In general terms, because of his or her job or function, a privileged user has been granted administrative access to the systems. A privileged user, for example, would be able to set up and delete user accounts and roles. That means it has the privilege of doing that particular tasks for the enterprise and the organizations. Then provisioning. The process of creating identities, defining their access privileges, and adding them to an ID repository. Then another attribute here is risk-based authentication. So in risk-based authentication, dynamically adjust authentication requirements based on the user's situation at the moment authentication is attempted. For example, when users attempt to authenticate from a geographic location or IP address not previously associated with them, those users may face additional authentication requirements. That means they had to provide some of the evidence or the verification for that authentication requirement. Then another point is, or another attribute here is security principle. A digital identity with one or more credential that can be authenticated and authorized to interact with the network. Then single sign-on, a type of access control for multiple related but separate systems. With a single username and password, or user can access a system or systems without using different credentials. Then another attribute here for identity as a service is user behavior analytics. UBA, commonly known as UBA technologies, examine patterns of user behavior and automatically apply algorithms and analysis to detect important anomalies that may indicate potential security threats. UBA differs from other security technologies which focus on tracking devices or security events. UBA is also sometimes grouped with entity behavior analytics and known as UEBA. Thank you.